Good morning and afternoon. It's Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Welcome all to the Sharing Show. I'm Kane, and I'm joined today with David, better known as the Workday Sharing Guy, along with Logan, Teresa, and special guests.
Thanks, Kane. Can you tell me what is the most important thing about the Zoom chat?
Absolutely, Logan. The most important thing, this is the sharing show. So we like everybody to share and interact with everybody on the show and also the attendees and panelists. So make sure you click on the chat icon below and change your default to all panelists and attendees. So that way, when you interact, everyone will get the message and we'll continue the great sharing movement that has been created here. So without further ado, I shall pass this over to you guys to take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Kane. We are going to test your chat to make sure that you have switched your default over to all panelists and attendees, or for some people it might say everyone. Make sure you switch that over, and I'm going to ask you a question. Are you attending tomorrow's Workday Share-a-thon between 9 and 10:30 Pacific? If you are, in the chat, respond Y for yes, for sure attending, M for maybe, depending on work, and for no, unfortunately, I've got to miss it. And if you don't know what a security share-a-thon is, then just put a question mark in the chat. And that way we can test that you're sending to everyone, all panelists and attendees, and we can get some information about whether you're joining us tomorrow.
Thank you, Logan. I think that some people are brand new to the sharing show and the customer sharing movement. So some people might not know what a share-a-thon is. Often people say, oh yeah, I watched your share-a-thon on YouTube. There is no such thing there. The sharing show and share-a-thon is different, right? This is a 30-minute sharing show. We get the PowerPoint ahead of time. It's partially scripted, not completely, right? The share-a-thon tomorrow starts at the same time, but goes for 90 minutes. And there's no script at all. There's maybe no PowerPoint. People ask questions, other people answer. We're all on a Zoom. Maybe some people will share their face.
So it looks like next we have our Kahoot. So we have an audience where it looks like we're going to do a survey. And please make sure when you go to Kahoot, you go to kahoot.it. And we're going to take a quick survey.
Okay, your PIN is 744-5029, 744-5029, 744-5029. You know, these are often 6 digits, and I got to tell you, all the time when I forget my password, I've given like a 6-digit code on my phone, and then I have to go over to my computer. I've almost got to the point that I can memorize 7 digits, not just 6. But how do the best do it? 7,445,029, probably not the best. I like the 44 there. I grew up in Los Angeles, big fan of Jerry West. So 744-5029. Here's the first. There is no right answer, by the way. It's a survey. We're asking you guys to tell us who you are. What game do you prefer to play? Backgammon, chess, cards, or none, that you don't like games? You know, pick one of these. Green if you don't like to play games, or I guess one of those. Okay, cards I thought would be the most. I wasn't sure how many chess players there are out there. More chess players than backgammon. And hardly anyone doesn't like games. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing Workday. For tomorrow's Security Share-a-thon, are you going to share, ask, listen in? So I know a whole bunch of people can't make it from the previous one, but I do want to know how many people want to share something with security. I think it's going to be very few. Maybe a bunch of blue, but probably mostly yellow. Let's see what happens. Yeah, okay. So far, we've got one person who has a security question. Lots of listener inners. So, all right, hopefully there are people sharing and asking for all the listener inners. Otherwise, it'll be dead air. Which of these is your strongest reporting related skills or skill? Prompts, dashboards, calculated fields, or composite recording. You have to pick one. I mean, if you don't pick any, I guess that means you don't feel strong in any of them at all. But like, which is your strongest of these? Okay, a fair number are strong in calculated fields, about even prompts and dashboards, and just a couple with composite recording.
And who do we have up next on today's fantastic lineup of sharing fans?
So our next share is coming from David, the sharing guy.
Okay, thank you, Logan and Teresa. I'm going to try to go fast because I just have a whole bunch of slides. My disclaimer, I used to work for Workday. I was employee 149 back in 2007. Hit my 13-year anniversary a couple months ago. I'm on a mission to help as many Workday customers as possible. And that means this thing we're doing now, the sharing show. We've got one more before we end season 2, one in December, and that's it. So you really have only one more of these for a couple months, maybe January, February too, maybe 3 or 4 months, no more sharing show until we get season 3 kicked off. So I'm highly recommending share-a-thons. Tomorrow we've got security. I highly recommend something called share dates, which you're going to see more about. All of this is part of the customer sharing movement. So what is the customer sharing movement? Several of you are getting emails. It would look like this. If you're not receiving these emails, you could reach out to me, make sure you get onto the email list. But it will let you know when there are share-a-thons. These are no longer announced on community. So there is emails that come to you, lets you also know about share dates and announcements there. The best place to go is the LinkedIn group, Customer Sharing Movement. These are customers only, by the way, 456 so far. I like when those numbers line up like that, 456. And you'll see announcements there on the LinkedIn group. Now, announcing for the first time right now, customersharingmovement.com webpage, and there's a share-a-thons page under that, and it would let you know also. So these are places where you could go and find out when they are. You just can't get into them unless you're a Workday customer. For those who missed the sharing show, the last episode, the Halloween episode, Angeli, who was co-host for security theme, is of course helping with that share-a-thon tomorrow. Now, speaking of Angeli, that show, of course, is on the YouTube channel. So let's talk about, can't avoid doing it because it's Movember. The month of November is, for me, the month of Movember. 6 years in a row now, I'm captain of the Workday Alumni Customer and Friends team. We're aiming to get 100 members, which means only 88 more to go. So there's a fictitious character here, Future David, but Future David will be here tomorrow. And once we hit 100 members, somebody gets to pick what the shaved Dave is going to look like. So there's lefty, there's upper lefty, there's lower lefty, there's the double mohawk, there's the purple squirrel. People might not know what that is. So all different types. Now, some unlucky, or I mean lucky person has to tell me what my look is like after we get to 100 members. Now, if you don't want to, my daughter will happily shave my entire head. The other goal, finish in the top 5. We finished in the top 10 all 5 previous years. Last year, we finished in the top 5 for the first time. And the thing is, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to do any fundraising. Just join the team. It's supposed to be fun and educational and healing for people. So you join the team, have some fun through that. And one reason we know we're going to make our goal is from the 3-day Share-a-thon Marathon back at the end of September, sponsored by Team Up HR, Making Workday Work for You, and Good Time IO. There were enough people at the 3-day Share-a-thon Marathon that they are donating $10,567.89 to the team. So we're going to make our goal for sure. Now, speaking of Good Time IO, they and Team Up HR have put together these things called share dates. You can become a host, and you'll see we already have several hosts. Hosts don't have to have all the answers. As a host, you're sharing, you could be asking. If you want somebody to help you with security, you could become a host and say in your paragraph here, I want help with security. It's not that hosts are not just sitting there answering your questions for 30 minutes. That's not how it's supposed to go. It's supposed to be sharing. So it's not necessarily that hosts have all the answers. We have over a dozen hosts, and sometimes they ask me, it's like, well, what if I get asked a question I don't know the answer to? Perfect. That's the idea. That's what the sharing movement's about. That shows you where to click to become a host. And we have several of our hosts on the show today, which we're getting to here in a second. You can click on any one of them, actually, to be a guest of those hosts. As a host, you specify the 30-minute slots you want. We aim for maybe 1 hour minimum per week. This is showing 3 different Wednesdays for one of our hosts, 1 hour minimum, and then there's 2 other Wednesdays. As a guest, you pick 1 slot, that's it, 30 minutes. It fits in with the free Zoom.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Who's next on our lineup of sharing fans?
Next, we have Matilda from Sweden.
Hi, welcome. Thanks. It's good to be back. I started Workday a couple of years ago. Love number logic. Been doing reporting since prior to launching, and now also doing security since about a year back. Love the tricky part about Workday and kind of the strength you get when you are solving those problems as well. And then we have the share for today. So when we were live, we realized we had tons of copies of reports. You know, we wanted the contact list with employee ID, contact list with manager number, and all of those copies you get because people are asking, I want especially this or just this part. So we ended up doing a lot of one-timers or having a bunch of things that we needed to update on. So we did that and realized that there's a better solution for it that I found recently on the community. They called the flexible report. Well, for us at least, it was a wow experience, even for being alive a few years. So you can find the link to the community, to the original post here and here if you want to. It basically allows your user to build their own reports. They can select the population that they want to run a report for. They can select which fields they want to return in the reports. You can still keep the security intact, so they will only see what they normally have access to see. And you can also use it, of course, if you want to schedule report for those odd requests you get sometimes. So basically on the backside, would recommend on building it for HM reporting. If you build it on effective date, please make sure that the fields that you're using are working as you're expecting to do. When you're doing the filters, it's always nice if you're using those that are indexed ones, because it will improve your performance. It's not a must, but it's good. What is a must, though, is that everyone you are sharing the report with need to have access to all the fields you're using in the filter, or they will not be able to use the reports. And you will need to make sure that you only are using soft filters, because otherwise you don't keep the report flexible. So you need to also enable the save parameters, because that allows users to save their favorite searches and don't need to tick the boxes time after time. When you do the different columns, you need to select do not show if empty. And we will come back to that a bit later, but that's the important part. So for the users, they pick the organization in this top section. Which organization do you want to run it for is the mandatory. It comes from the HM. And then whatever else you think that your population want to run the report for. In the next part, you select which information is it that your population would want to see. You can group the data in things that makes most sense for your users, or just do them one by one if you want a longer list that's more flexible. You also have this tick box to see all data. That doesn't mean all data, it means all the data that you have access to. When you run the report, it's also good to tell them that if you have grouped it and they only want to see part of that, they can, of course, as in any advanced report, choose what they want to show by clicking on that icon, the second one to the right. They can untick the boxes, they can put a specific column to freeze and so on to limit what they see. But also remember to tell them that when they will run the report the next time, the icon will be blue and their pre-made choices will still be there. So if they think they're missing something, please make sure they click there and reset to default value or something, or uncheck what they're doing. Okay, so the calc fields. You first need to do one that's prompt for value. That is for all. So this is the one that will be used when you tick this box, show me everything I can see. It's important that the required field is not ticked. It should be empty, that I highlighted in red. Then you need to do another prompt for value per field or per group that you are wanting to use. For example, this one for worker. These two you're then using in an evaluate expression. And you can see here it's called Boolean worker or Boolean select all. Both will return the worker value. But it means that if either of these tick boxes have been ticked, it will return worker. Otherwise, it will return empty instance, which means since we in the column selected do not show if empty, the column will not show.
All right, Matilda, I'm showing all three of those just so
Yeah.
people.
Okay, so just to keep it simple, this is how you can create things that return empty. I spent some time trying to find that for some. When it is a numeric value, however, you need to do another calc field behind that one to create it empty. So you need to convert text to numbers on the empty string.
Okay, so
That's-
any questions in the chat? All right, Matilda, I'm going to go back through these slides.
Yeah.
And that's because it took me a while to understand what the heck was going on here. And I'm guessing a few people are smiling. So first off, it's there on community. On the right are a list of all the things that the user of your report could say, well, here's what I want to see in my output. And so I also want to point out here, like our favorite checkbox. This is a time we actually leave it checked, right? And so then when you leave it checked, you will only get to see yellow in the filter. If you uncheck it, it doesn't mean it's going to move slower. It just means you could accidentally filter by something that's not golden or yellow. Okay, thank you, Matilda. This is great. I mean, after I understood what it was, I thought, wow, this is amazing. So thank you for finding this and explaining it. And the questions go to you on the chat.
Who's next on today's fantastic lineup of sharing fans?
Up next, we're going to have Meredith from Texas. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you. So I work in higher education. We went live almost 3 years ago. I was working on it during the implementation before that. And I work in the benefits area. So I do open enrollment and all the ACA reporting and compliance. We have a pretty big population. So one of our biggest things we've struggled with every year since go live is that we have so many changes in benefit groups during open enrollment, and that the reports that Workday delivers really weren't that helpful for us. They have to be run separately for each benefit group, and we have 15 benefit groups. And there's 2 that you have to kind of look at together. So when it's all said and done, we had 30 reports that we had to compare to figure out what was going on with people that were having benefit group changes during our open enrollment period. And when you pulled the report and you finally got it up, it didn't have employee ID. It didn't have a lot of information on it. So you really didn't know exactly what you were looking at. So we decided, I worked with my reporting team who are amazing. I can't take complete credit for this, but I said, what can we do to get this all in one report? So we created this. We have a lot of filters on it. And the biggest thing was that we wanted to have everything in one place. So we wanted employee ID, name, their current benefit group, future benefit group. If they have an OE event, what's the benefit group on that? And then the status, because if they had already submitted their open enrollment and we were going to be changing it, we needed to reach out to them to let them know. And so there's 3 big areas for how to do this, or for issues that are problems. So one of them is ineligible worker with no OE. So they drop below benefits eligible threshold. So you just cancel their OE. Eligible worker that doesn't have an open enrollment event, or the biggest one that was kind of a pain to track before, and that's benefit group mismatch. So if they were in the wrong benefit group, then they would have the wrong premiums as of 9/1, the beginning of our plan year, unless we canceled that OE and gave them a new one. And so this is what it looks like. It's a lot on one screen. There's actually more columns out to the right that aren't showing, but it has everything in one place. It tells you everything you might need to look at. And because it's so self-explanatory, we were able to delegate this to our benefit partners at all of our different companies, which was huge because they're the ones who really know what's going on. You know, is Benny truly going to be under 20 hours a week, or is this a timing issue with staffing and they haven't added one of his additional jobs for the fall yet? And that's the kinds of things we were seeing before. They'd show up on these discrepancy reports, but really the people at the member level that know the guys know what's going to happen for the upcoming semester.
So Meredith, you don't put in here preferred names. So I see Benny, Harry, and Elizabeth. I could guess what Elizabeth's preferred name is, but
She goes by Beth.
do you want to share with people where the names came from so they know we're not sharing private data on the sharing
They're
chat?
all from the Queen's Gambit.
Nice.
On Netflix. Great show. So the other thing is, once we finished this, and I thought this was a game changer for us this year during open enrollment. So I did post it on community as a contributed solution, 667074. And our reporting team went back after I posted it and gave screenshots and things of all of the calc fields that they use. So it should have everything in there that you would need to reproduce something similar. And it's the power of one, because it's one report that gives you everything that previously we had to run 30 reports to really get at the data.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. And thank you for the pointer to the Queen's Gambit.
And who's next on today's lineup? What do we have coming?
Next, we have Mike from Tennessee. Welcome, Mike.
All right. So, wow, that was a really, really good, it's going to be a hard act to follow, that benefit report, Meredith. I may give that one to our benefits group. It sounds pretty comprehensive. I like it. I live in Tennessee and been working with Workday since 2008, mostly doing integrations, but for each of my integrations, I also have to write a custom report. So I've been doing both. And today, I'm going to talk about reports that include terminated workers. And one of the problems that we have is that for various reasons, people get terminated, but the termination doesn't get entered until sometimes weeks later. I hate to say it, but occasionally it's even months later. And they have their reasons for it. I don't like it, but what the problem is that if you just look at termination date and you're running a report every week, then the person at the week, when the week rolls around, they're not terminated until later. And even if you wait a week, you'll often miss it. And in this case, I have a description where the termination, the date that the termination is entered, is like October 29, but they were really terminated on October 3. And so if you run a report on October 7, that person is not terminated in the system. If you run it on the 14th, they're not terminated yet. You run it on the 21st, they're still not terminated. You run it on the 28th, they're still not terminated. Then you run it on November 4, and suddenly they're terminated, but they don't show up on the report because the termination date is so far back. And if you're only looking at 1 week at a time, then you miss that backdated termination. So one of the ways you can get around this is you can just run the report for multiple weeks. But the problem with that is terminated people will show up over and over and over each week. And the second problem with that is that if you choose a date range, let's say you go back 4 weeks, then occasionally you'll have somebody who's terminated 5 weeks back. And again, you just still miss that person. And so to get around this problem, what we've had to do is, instead of basing the criteria on the effective date, which means the date that the termination happens, we do it on the date it's entered. And this can be a little bit difficult because the date entered is typically not on the benefit election. It's often on some other business object. So for instance, if you are looking at a termination, you're going to have to go to a staffing event to find when that was entered. It's not going to be direct, which means you're going to have some calculated fields. And so in this example, I'm going to show there's 2 calculated fields. There's actually a host of other calculated fields, but I'm going to simplify it to just the 2 fields. The second field is a logical field, a true false field for the condition. So here we go. We're looking at this field. If you look at the name of this field, I've named it staffing event in range criteria. And what that means is that this staffing event is going to include, this field is going to include the criteria necessary to get the staffing event that I want to see. So the criteria is built into this calculated field. I really don't like building criteria in here. I don't like building criteria into a calculated field because I prefer to have it in the filter condition of the report. But there are times when you must, the only way to get it is to put the filter into the calculated field. So I don't like this, but this is the only way we could find to do it. So before I go any further, I wish I had a pointer here, but if you look at the top, the field name is staffing events in range criteria. The business object is worker. Now, for those of you who have done calculated fields, you know what that means. But this was one of the biggest things one of the first things, thank you. That business object worker, what that tells you when you create a calculated field, worker is where this field is going to be located. So when it says business object, that's not the one you're looking for. That's where this field will be attached. And that was a huge learning experience for me. And I noticed on the first person who demonstrated from Sweden, I noticed one of her calculated fields was on the global business object. If you look at this business object, when I create this field, the only place you'll find this field is on worker. But if you put it on the global business object, then any business object you use can access that field. The last field on that page is the condition. And this is also a calculated field. And I've called it the logic for the port conversion report. And so this is a true false field. And if you notice, if you're careful, you'll see that this business object is the staffing event. So when I'm on the staffing event object, I can find out if that staffing event meets the criteria that I have below. If somebody is keen and looking at this, you'll see I have 3 start parentheses, open parentheses, and no closing parentheses. And the reason for that is I have pulled out the critical fields. There's some other fields that in this report were specific to this report about which, this is a benefits report or benefits integration, but which benefit it was going to select. And so I pulled those out. But if you look here, the first 2 things are the date and time completed. That date and time is the date and time when this staffing event was completed. So when someone's entering a termination, they go through a process. And when that process is completed, that is the date and time I want to pick up. Because when that date and time is completed, and it happens in the week that I'm running this report, no matter how far back or how far forward that termination actually is, I'll report it in the week that it was recorded, not in the week that it is effective. And the last row in there, so I'm looking at a prompted date and time, which is for the prompt, and then the last row is I want the business process type to be a termination. You can do this for any kind of business process type that you want to look for. In my case, I'm using termination. So I'm selecting the termination business type. That gives me the type of staffing event, and then it has to happen within that date range.
Okay, Mike, thank you for this. And to clarify, there's a lot of lines missing that you're not showing because Workday wouldn't let you have 3 open parentheses without any closing parentheses, right? That's what you're pointing out?
That's what I was pointing out. And the other criteria wasn't really important for this, but.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Great. So who's next?
Up next, we have George from New York. Welcome, George.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for having me on the sharing show. So I'm in New York. I work for a company that uses both Workday Financials and HCM, but I focus on financials primarily. And I have a story to tell you about Wally. This is Wally. He works in his company's Workday support team, and he is writing a report. So it's a very basic report. You see on the right-hand side, it's just on the supplier's data source, and it's got only 2 columns, not a very fancy report. And you can see it's just a listing of the suppliers in the Workday tenant. So Wally was pretty happy with this, but he wanted to see if he could spice things up a bit. He wanted to make his report have a prompt that would display at the top of the report and just be a memo. In other words, he wanted to be able to write something that would show up there at the top of the report. So he thought to himself, I know how to do this, right? I've got to make a prompt. So he went to the prompts tab in the report, and he chose to create a prompt field. And you see in the lower right-hand corner, he called it memo, and it was a text prompt. And then he defined the defaults for the prompt, right? So he said he's going to call it memo. He put in the default value there, write your memo here, so that it would, remind him that he could type whatever he wanted to there. And he was all excited that he had it right. But then when he went to save the report, he got this error. Poor Wally. The error is the entered information does not meet the restrictions defined for this field. Not very helpful at all, right? You can't quite tell what's going on. And Wally was frustrated. He thought about giving up on this idea. But as all of you listening know, because you work with Workday, a lot of what we do in Workday is trial and error. And so he kept trying, and he kept thinking about how he might accomplish this, and he came up with a solution. So his solution was, first he made a text constant calculated field. And so you can see in the lower left-hand corner, it's just a hyphen, nothing fancy on this. And notice it's on the business object supplier, the one that he was using in his report. Okay, and maybe he could have done it on the global business object. In this case, Wally chose to put it on the supplier business object. Next, he added criteria to his report that was based on that new calculated field. So you see that hyphen, it says contains something that I'm going to prompt for the user, or does not contain something I'm going to prompt the user for. So just a word of caution, if you have multiple filter conditions in your report, be careful with those parentheses, just like what we were just saying with Mike. You got to have open and close parentheses. But since we're using or logic here, we want to make sure those parentheses go around these two things on the new calculated field, right? Contains the prompt, does not contain the prompt. So next, Wally went to his prompts tab. He clicked the button to define undefined prompt defaults, which made row number 2 show up down there. And now he filled in the rest of the stuff, right? The calculated field is in use there, right? And then we're specifying a default value of write your memo here. So now when Wally runs the report, on the left-hand side, he sees his memo, and whatever he writes in there shows up at the top of the report output on the right-hand side. And so you can imagine you can use this for lots of things. Even cooler, I think, is that when Wally distributes this report, and so he might schedule this to run, let's say weekly, you could run this report and maybe you're distributing it to different folks in your Workday community. And you can write things like, here are the Q3 results, or please look over the following, that kind of stuff. But it's flexible, a bit like Matilda's report, right? Each time he uses this, he can put in a different value in that prompt, and it will show up at the top of the report, even when he distributes the report and schedules it automatically. Now, this came out, Wally's story is fictitious, but it came out of a real thing. There was a post on community, this is the node 654178, where someone was trying to create this, and that's the solution that we came up. So if you want to look this up on community, there's the node where you can see more details.
All right. And George, it looks like Wally was quite successful. Maybe you can invite him to be a guest on the next show.
Yeah, maybe he can participate in the Movember challenge there, David.
Oh, that would be even better. Wally Wonder's team on the Movember team. Great. Thank you, George.
Great. Thanks so much. What do we have next on our agenda?
And we are going to go to our quiz Kahoot.
Okay. And right before doing that, Kane, I just wanted to bring to people's attention here that all the videos, in case people are dropping right after winning the Kahoot, that all the videos are on YouTube. We'll get this one up as soon as we can. This is for bragging rights. And of course, a t-shirt. So we got to go back through all season 2, send out t-shirts to those who have made the podium. So you might be getting some emails from us in case we don't yet have your t-shirt size and your mailing address. Here's the pin, 61 59 98, 6,159,908, 615 99 08. Okay, here we go. There's one right answer, and there's going to be 4 questions. Which data type is trickier to get empty value on? Multi-instance, character, numeric, or date? We did see an example where you have to get empty values. Was it trickiest on the multi-instance, on character text, numeric, or date? It was numeric. We saw how you have to actually create a calc field to get an empty value on the numeric. That is quite tricky. Really happy to see that example. Okay, of course, it's very close here in the first 5. And Matilda, of course, you knew the answer to that one. Thank you for recommending it. For you, the best share report on community, make sure no prompts, no calc fields, only report-specific calc fields, or you create a solution. What's the best way for you to share a report on community? I know some people might think this is a trick question, but you can have prompts and calc fields. That doesn't matter. But you do have to create the solution. So, and then you get all the calc fields. Maybe I gave that away when I interrupted the presentation. Very close. Actually, it's a tie for first. So that we have 2 more questions. Question 3. To obtain a subset, use which calc field function? Substring text, extract multiple instance, extract single instance, some related instances. We did see a subset. Which calc field function type was that on? Okay, Mike showed us on an extract multiple instance. You have the option to say subset. So more than half got that right. Okay, the final question here is going to determine the winner. And you really had to pay attention for this one. Okay, security sharing fan, Angeli, who on Halloween last year? Was she a Neil, Gene, Johnny, or Billy? One of these is the right answer. If you were on the show 2 weeks ago, that might have helped you, or you had to really pay attention there to what she was wearing or what it said. And then maybe you still have to guess. She was wearing purple. She was Willy Wonka, not Billy. And more people got it right than any other. So she had said Gene Wilder, not Johnny Depp. First name only on the sharing show. Let's see who won. Alex C, congrats. Only 9 milliseconds past Heather, who had the right answer. Matilda, close behind. Also Stacy and Jerome, runner-up. Congratulations to everyone who made the podium. Special congrats to Alex for your 9 millisecond win over Heather. All right, Kane, as we wrap this up, I do want to point out something here on these final slides, which is I had some incredible pumpkin carving going on at my house. I found out who was carving my pumpkin. So I wasn't staring. I just got so lucky to take a look out my front door. And I did find that Fluffy is my mysterious pumpkin carving champion. And I don't know what happens when Fluffy meets Purple Squirrel. That's maybe what I'll find out in a few months. But that's a reminder there that the Purple Squirrel was a friend of Willy Wonka's. Okay, Kane, thank you for letting me go through that. You gotta wrap us up.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And thank you, Logan, Teresa. And special thank you to our guests for speaking on the show today. As always, we do publish these recordings on our YouTube channel. Please head over and like it and subscribe it. And you will get notified when the latest episode goes live. So all that's left to say is we will see you shortly and we'll announce new dates. And everybody have a great workday.